The golden gates of the Abramovich estate did not just keep the world out, they kept a rigid, centuries-old standard of prestige in. When the youngest heir to a multi-billion-dollar energy empire decided to follow his heart rather than his father's strategic blueprints, the world watched a real-life succession drama unfold. This is not a fairy tale where the prince saves the commoner and they live happily ever after on a yacht in the Mediterranean. This is a story of a silent war fought in bank accounts and boardrooms, where a father's pride collided with a son's devotion to a woman who once served him coffee in a bustling Manila cafe. The fallout was immediate, brutal, and public, leaving an empire divided and a young man choosing between the weight of a crown and the warmth of a genuine connection. The setting for this fallout was the glittering skyline of Moscow, where the elder Abramovich ruled with an iron fist and a portfolio worth more than the GDP of some small nations. His son, Alexei, had been groomed from birth to take over the mantle, attending the finest schools and moving in circles where marriage was less about love and more about merging balance sheets. However, a business trip to the Philippines changed the trajectory of the dynasty forever. It was in a quiet corner of a high-end hotel where Alexei met Maria, a waitress working double shifts to send money back to her province. While the billionaire's son was used to women who sought his status, he found himself captivated by someone who didn't even know his last name. Their initial meetings were discreet, away from the prying eyes of the international paparazzi and the judgmental gaze of Alexei's inner circle. To Maria, he was just a kind foreigner with a heavy burden on his shoulders. To Alexei, she was a breath of fresh air in a life suffocated by expectation. He found himself extending his stay, finding excuses to visit the same cafe, and eventually confessing his true identity. Maria was hesitant, knowing the vast chasm that lay between their worlds, but the connection was undeniable. When Alexei eventually proposed, he knew he wasn't just asking for her hand, he was effectively handing back the keys to his father's kingdom. The news of the secret wedding reached the Kremlin-connected circles before Alexei could even break it to his father personally. The elder Abramov, a man who valued loyalty and legacy above all else, viewed the marriage as a personal betrayal and a strategic disaster. He had already scouted potential brides from the daughters of European industrial magnates, women who would bring land, influence, and more capital to the family name. To him, his son had not just married a waitress, he had insulted the very foundation of their family's prestige. The confrontation that followed was legendary in the circles of the ultra-wealthy, ending with a cold ultimatum that echoed through the halls of their private villa. The patriarch gave his son 48 hours to annul the marriage or face total financial exile. It was a test of resolve that the elder Abramovich assumed he would win, believing that no one used to the life of private jets and five-star luxury could survive in the real world without a safety net. But Alexei, moved by a sense of purpose he had never felt in the boardroom, chose Maria. The retaliation was swift. Within hours, his credit cards were deactivated, his access to family trusts was severed, and his name was removed from the succession plan of the energy firm. The billionaire disowned his only heir, leaving the young couple to navigate a world that was suddenly much smaller and far less gilded. The transition from a life of limitless wealth to one of budgeting and career hunting was a shock to the system for the former heir. He found himself in a modest apartment far from the luxury of the Arbat district, learning for the first time what it meant to live on a salary. Maria, who had spent her life working for every penny, became the pillar of the household, teaching her husband the nuances of a life he had only viewed from the tinted windows of a limousine. Despite the loss of the billions, the couple found a sense of autonomy that the Abramov empire had always denied them. They were no longer chess pieces in a billionaire's game. They were a family, starting from scratch.
Back in the marble halls of the Abramov headquarters, the vacuum left by the son's departure created a PR nightmare. The Tycoon tried to frame the disinheritance as a matter of character, claiming his son lacked the discipline to lead. However, the public saw a different story, one of an aging man who valued his ego over his own flesh and blood. The elder Abramov's refusal to acknowledge the marriage turned him into a symbol of the disconnected elite, while Alexei and Maria became icons of romantic defiance. The story resonated across social media, drawing parallels to historical romances where love demanded the ultimate sacrifice of power and position.
As months turned into years, the reality of the rift became permanent. The elder Abramov began looking toward distant relatives to secure his legacy, while Alexei built a career in independent consulting, using the education his father had paid for to forge a path that was entirely his own. The billionaire's attempt to break the couple only seemed to forge a stronger bond between them. They lived a life that was rich in experiences rather than assets, often traveling back to the Philippines to visit Maria's family, where the former billionaire's son found a sense of community he had never experienced in the cold, competitive atmosphere of Moscow high society.
Despite the financial hardships, the couple remained steadfast in their decision. They welcomed a child into the world who would grow up without the Abramov name, but with the freedom to choose their own destiny. This development only deepened the patriarch's bitterness as he realized his lineage was continuing outside of his control. He had the money to buy anything in the world, but he could not buy the affection or the presence of his only grandchild. The story became a cautionary tale for the global elite about the limits of control and the true definition of value in a world obsessed with net worth. The media continued to follow the saga, noting the stark contrast between the elder Abramovich's increasingly isolated life and the vibrant, if humble, life of his son. The Tycoon's health began to decline, leading to speculation about whether a reconciliation was on the horizon. Yet pride is a powerful motivator for men who have built empires. Even as he faced his own mortality, the billionaire remained silent, refusing to bridge the gap he had created. He had built a wall of gold so high that even he could no longer see over it to the son he had once hoped would carry his name into the future. The story of the Russian heir and the Manila waitress serves as a modern-day parable about the cost of integrity. In a society that often measures success by the size of one's bank account, Alexei's choice was seen by some as foolish and by others as heroic. For Maria, the journey was one of immense pressure as she carried the weight of being the woman who supposedly ruined a dynasty. However, she proved that her character was sturdier than any corporate structure. She didn't want the billions, she wanted a partner who saw her as an equal. And in walking away from his inheritance, Alexei proved he was exactly that. The fallout also sparked a conversation about the changing nature of the global elite. Younger generations of the ultra-wealthy are increasingly pushing back against the rigid expectations of their parents, seeking more meaningful lives over traditional power structures. The Abramov case was the most extreme example of this trend, showing that the threat of poverty is no longer enough to keep an independent spirit in line. The energy empire continued to thrive on paper, but the heart of the family had been carved out, replaced by a cold ledger of assets and liabilities that offered no comfort to the man at the top. In the end, the viral nature of this story lies in its relatability despite the extreme circumstances. Almost everyone has felt the pressure to conform to family expectations, or has had to choose between what is easy and what is right. While most people will never have to choose between $1 billion and a spouse, the emotional core of the dilemma is universal. The image of a man leaving a private jet for a public bus to be with the woman he loves is a powerful visual that transcends language and culture, making it a staple of digital storytelling and documentary analysis. The billionaire's son eventually found success in his own right, proving that while his father could take away his money, he could not take away his drive. He became a symbol of self-made success, albeit with a very different starting point than his peers. He and Maria built a life that was defined by their own choices, not by a trust fund. They remained a testament to the idea that some things are simply not for sale, no matter how high the bidding goes. Their story continues to inspire those who feel trapped by their circumstances, reminding them that the exit door is always there if they are brave enough to walk through it. The silence from the Abramov estate remains to this day a hollow monument to a man who won the world but lost his family. The elder Abramov continues to oversee his holdings, but his public appearances are marked by a visible loneliness. He is a man who successfully protected his wealth from a perceived threat, only to find that wealth is a poor companion in old age. The energy empire will eventually pass to a stranger or a distant cousin, while the true legacy of the Abramov name lives on in a small house where the laughter of a child is louder than the rustle of banknotes. The narrative of the disinherited heir is one that will likely be told for generations. It challenges the notion that wealth is the ultimate goal of the human experience. By choosing a waitress over a fortune, Alexei redefined what it meant to be a billionaire. He realized that true richness is found in the freedom to love without permission and to live without a script written by someone else. The world may have lost a future industrialist, but it gained a story of genuine human spirit that resonates far more than a stock market update ever could.
As the couple moves forward, they remain largely out of the public eye, preferring a life of privacy over the spotlight that once followed them. They have turned down numerous offers for book deals and movie rights, choosing to protect the sanctity of their relationship. This refusal to further monetize their story only adds to their credibility, showing that their choices were never about fame or a different kind of fortune. They are simply two people who found each other in a chaotic world and decided that their connection was the only thing worth holding on to.
The legacy of the elder Abramovich, meanwhile, has become synonymous with the pitfalls of extreme ego. His name is now frequently mentioned in discussions about the toxic nature of inherited wealth and the emotional bankruptcy that can occur at the highest levels of power. He serves as a reminder that the most important investments are often the ones that cannot be tracked on a spreadsheet. His son's departure was not a loss of capital, but a loss of future, a realization that seems to have arrived too late for the man in the Moscow penthouse. The story ends not with a grand reconciliation, but with a quiet acceptance of the new reality. Alexei and Maria continue to build their life together, grounded in the values they share. They have proven that the strength of a marriage is not determined by the size of the wedding or the pedigree of the participants, but by the willingness of two people to stand by each other when the world turns its back. It is a story of resilience, a story of love, and ultimately a story of what happens when the heart refuses to follow the rules of the house. The Abramovich saga remains a peak example of why these stories go viral. They provide a window into a world of unimaginable wealth while grounding it in the most basic human emotions. It is a reminder that under the layers of luxury and the veneer of power, we are all searching for the same thing, a place where we are valued for who we are, not for what we bring to the table. Alexei found that place in the arms of a woman from Manila, and in doing so, he became the richest man in the world in the ways that actually matter.